So I mean, let's talk about the evolution of this idea of austerity because it has been around for quite some time. Where did it come from?
You have to honestly go all the way back to basically the origins of capitalism in England and the post-Civil War settlement and people like John Locke and then the Scottish Enlightenment of Smith and Hume and others. And basically you have this wonderful tension that goes on between markets and states. So the standard sort of Smithian story is that individuals create markets and the state's out there to try and steal your money. Well, there's a more sophisticated version if you actually read Locke and Smith and others. And what they basically acknowledge is the following. I'll quote Smith for a moment. Smith says that for every rich man, there must be 500 poor. And because of that, he is surrounded by jealousy. And if it wasn't for the strong arm of the magistrate, then basically his stuff would be stolen. So why do you need a state? You need a state to police the inequalities that untrammeled markets make possible. But here's the kicker. In order to be strong enough to do that, you need to have a state that's big enough and powerful enough to police those inequalities, which means you have to pay for it. And the trouble is you don't want to pay for it. So there's a dilemma at the heart of this. You don't acknowledge that the state makes markets possible, but it does. You don't want to pay for it, and you don't trust it. So here's a little wheeze that comes up. It's called government debt. How about the government pays you to lend it money? That'd be like a financial free option, the best of all possible worlds. But the problem is, by doing so, and this is the classical story from which austerity springs, the government has to offer you a rate of interest greater than you would get in normal pursuits. As a consequence, and this is the crowding out argument, all the money gets diverted into government debt rather than the real economy. We end up with more and more debt. We indebt ourselves. Eventually we become in hock to foreigners, and then eventually the economy collapses. So debt is at once an elixir and a poison. It's something which gets over this can't live with it, can't live without it, don't want to pay for it problem, but it ultimately creates its own problem, which is the indebtedness of the nation and the bankruptcy of the nation. Now, seen in that way, any government that grows too big or issues too much debt, whatever that threshold is seen to be, is on the road to ruin, and that's the inevitability, and that's where the idea comes from. There's just one slight problem with this rendition of events. It's not true. At the time that Hume wrote this, Britain was emerging from the Napoleonic Wars and had a huge amount of debt, and he thoroughly thought that Britain was going to be bankrupt. It went on to dominate the global economy for 100 years.
Now, and in the context of our economy in this country, there's even more problems with that story. I mean, do we have a sense of? I mean, I know that Reinhardt and Rogoff have basically come out and said that 90 some odd percent of GDP is sort of the magic threshold where everything falls apart. But do we have any really sense that that's even an issue in the context of a post gold standard world in this country? I mean, do we have any sense of? Is there actually a point where that debt can bankrupt our country?
Well, that's an interesting thing about the Reinhardt and Rogoff study. I mean, basically everything you look at is either on a fix or on a gold standard. So if you have your own exchange rate and you can adjust to the exchange rate, this doesn't seem to be the case. It also is a case that size matters. When you are the United States and you issue the currency that everyone else has to earn in order to conduct foreign trade, it kind of changes the game. And we have a big natural experiment going on just now. You've got a bunch of countries in Europe all tied together that basically are about the same size as the United States, and they've been cutting their way to a depression. Meanwhile, the United States hasn't been doing that, and it's in a stuttering recovery, but at least it's in recovery. And the longer that takes hold, the more the divergence grows. So we do have a lot of evidence that this 90% thing really isn't true. The United States above 90% is growing a lot faster than Europe. So there's a bit of a chimera in that one to start with. But the key lesson here is what cures debt is growth. You can chip away at the nominal debt all you want. You can basically cancel government programs and send people home on furloughs and all this sort of stupid stuff. But at the end of the day, unless you're really, really willing to take 20%, 30% of GDP out of circulation, as the Greeks have done, and it hasn't done them any good whatsoever, you're just playing budgetary games. What gets rid of debt is growth. Consider the following. The United States hasn't actually paid back all of its debt from fighting the Civil War. You tell people this, they get shocked. You go, but think about the relative size of the United States economy then relative to it now. If my income doubles, the mortgage I've got now is half of the problem it was before. Growth cures debt. Cuts make debt worse.
Right, and in fact, our debt was a function rather than the crashing of the economy, being a function of debt. The debt was a function of the financial crisis.
Yeah, well, there's a long sort of process of accretion, and there is blame on both parties here. I mean, when you know you can issue the global reserve asset, you get lazy. Now, I'm perfectly fine with basically paying back debt. I don't think you should have excessive debt, however you define this. If the United States doesn't have to pay hundreds of billions of dollars in interest, then perhaps it shouldn't, and then we'd have more money for investing in things we actually want. But when you do this, you do it when you're growing. And this is a Keynesian line, but it's also a very commonsensical line. The boom, not the slump, is the time for austerity. The problem is not the economics. There are no such thing as Keynesian politicians. No one, Democrat or Republican, stands up in the Senate and says, everything's going great, the economy's humming along, we're all making a fortune, let's raise taxes. That just never happens, and that's exactly what you're meant to do in order to pay back debt. So we don't do that. So we dig our own grave. The financial sector the financial bailouts was just the most egregious example of
that. Let me ask you, why do you think that this idea has not died, this idea of austerity? We see what it's doing to Europe. We now even have the IMF coming out and saying, hey, we finally decided this is a bad idea. Why does it continue?
Well, part of it is because we've been living through, as people call it, the neoliberal era, whereby for 30 years we convinced ourselves that markets were good and states were bad, and states only ever got in the way, and left to their own devices, people with skin in the game would make optimal choices, and boom, then you have the financial crisis. And in a sense, it takes people a while to realize that what this means is a lot of the ways that they thought about the world and the way the world worked is actually wrong. But more deeply, it resonates because most people don't have the time to sit down and work out fallacies of composition, to figure out how the balance of payments works. That's all complex and time-consuming stuff, and also is error-prone. You ask the IMF for their forecast for 2004, I bet they said that 2008 would be a nice year. So, let's grant some kind of, let's say, generosity to the common sense of the man in the street. But at the same time, common sense solutions can be deeply misleading because it's deeply counterintuitive that cutting debt can lead to more debt if everybody tries it at the one time. So there's many reasons, and also there's ideological reasons. There are people out there like Grover Norquist who will do anything by any means necessary to drown the federal state in a bathtub, quote unquote. So you add all this together, ideology, epistemic arrogance, laziness, time, and you end up with a bunch of people who say, well, you got too much debt, just cut it. It's common sense. But yeah, but that common sense is a nonsense.
And just speak briefly as well about the so-called Rebel Alliance. One of the examples we hear quite a bit of austerity working is, among other places, Estonia. But that's not really an accurate depiction. And in fact, austerity, as in practice, aside from it being theoretically nonsensical, in practice, it has never worked to bring about any type of growth, has it?
Well, there are things that look like austerity that are often cited as examples. You think about Canada and Ireland in the 1980s. These are the great cases. They basically cut their debt and they grew. Well, part of the reason they did this is because 75% of their exports each go to a country right next door, the United States and Britain respectively. Those big economies were expanding. The small economies are export dependent, and they did a huge devaluation. The loonie lost 40% of its nominal value over a 10-year period. That's why you grow. It's not because of the expectations of consumers or people start spending more because they think they'll be paying less taxes in the future. It's a simple devaluation and real wage growth story. So that's part of the reason. We confuse things that aren't austerity effects for austerity effects. But the ones that are being hawked around now, the success of the Baltics, I mean, the reason these guys had to be so austere in the first place is because they privatized their entire banking systems to the point that foreign banks owed their money supplied. When the crisis hit in 2008, the Swedish and German banks threatened to pull all the money out of these systems, effectively pulling all the liquidity out of these economies. So in return for keeping the money there that was actually not theirs to start with, it was the depositors' money, the trick that was signed in Vienna in 2009 was to guarantee the balance sheets and bondholders of senior banks and senior bondholders of banks in in Germany and Sweden by basically cutting the pensions of people in Estonia. They went through a huge, huge slump and then they had a huge, huge bounce back. You know when the bounce back started? When they stopped doing austerity. There are automatic stabilizers in the economy. People who say that, intervention is a bad thing, they have a point because cutting is an intervention too. It's symmetrical. You've got to have both sides of the story here. Spending's an intervention, but so is cutting. And when you cut, it's contractionary. There is no evidence that these things produce positive expectations of future growth. Quite the contrary. If you look at the Eurobarometer data, the most economically pessimistic people in Europe are the Latvians and the Estonians. So this story simply doesn't explain the case that it supposedly does.
All right. So finally, I mean, what will bring about the demise? Will we ever end this allegiance to this basically this failed economic idea of austerity?
Unfortunately, what tends to do that is when the politics generated by it become extremely ugly. And we're not there yet, but the warning signs are already there. You have Golden Dawn in Greece. You have Beppe Grillo, who's basically the unfunny version of Stephen Colbert, being the kingmaker in Italy. You've got ructions in Spain continuing, a collapse in the vote of the major centrist parties that have been the main sort of bastions of democracies in these supposedly stable countries. Let's remember that what happened in Germany in 1920s and 1930s in closing. The Germans will tell you the stories about the inflation, but the inflation ended in 1924. And between 24 and 28, Germany was one of the more stable and prosperous and growing economies in Europe. A lot of it was borrowed American money, and that money went flying out in response to the Wall Street crash. And at that point in time, the Germans had no alternative because they thought the way to go was to cut. So they started to cut, and they started to cut, and they started to cut. And a very minor party called the National Socialists, who were polling less than 10%, suddenly got 18% of the vote. And then they were in the 20s, and then they were in the 30s, and then by 1933, by the time that Adolf was elected, they had 43% of the vote. So we should be very, very careful in these Panglossian estimates of just another 5 years of chronic unemployment, misery and suffering for people at the bottom of the income distribution. Because at the end of the day, they will protect themselves, but they will protect themselves in the worst possible way for all of us.
All right. Well, Professor Blyth, I appreciate your time today. I know that you are strapped for time, and would love to speak to you.
Got to run for the Amtrak.
Yes, would love to speak to you again in the future. Thanks for taking the time today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.